Hi and welcome to this Motion Mile After Effects tutorial. Today we're going to take a look at creating this space scene, which involves these kind of like energy, galaxy kind of elements, which we fly through and reach this swirling vortex feature. You will need optical flares for these colourful galaxies at the start here. But if you don't have this plug-in, I suppose you can just miss out this part and just follow the tutorial to create this spinning vortex and the titles. But that's the only plugin you'll need, optical flares. We're going to start by creating this vortex element here at the top before moving on to create the other elements. So we'll start by creating a 1080p composition. We'll just call this scene. And then I'm going to create a new solid. We'll call this energy. It doesn't matter what colour it is. And then we're going to go to the effects and presets and type in fractal noise. There it is. Double click that and we'll change the fractal type to turbulent smooth, and then the noise type to spline. And then we're going to boost the contrast up to about 160 and bring the brightness down to about -40. Complexity we'll boost up to 10. And then the scale, if we just toggle down the transform, we want to boost the scale right up to around about 1000. Do about 950. That's perfect so far. We've got like this cloudy effect going on, which is exactly what we want. But just to bring out some of these little speckles you can just see within here, just to boost them, we're going to add an effect called sharpen. There it is there. And then you want to boost that up to quite high, about 300. And then as you can see, we're starting to get these little dots now, which makes it look like stars or maybe even planets if it were a galaxy. And then because we're looking for that vortex kind of swirling look, we're going to use a plugin called Twirl, which is basically just going to twist and contort this design that we've got here. So the radius, we'll double that to 60, and the angle 190, which looks a bit weird now, but we need a black background. And then what we're going to do is eventually we're going to be making this a 3D layer and tilting it just so it isn't front on like this weird angle it is now. But we can do that later. What I'm just going to do is duplicate the energy layer. I'll just call this energy 2. And then we're just going to slightly alter some of these settings. So contrast. And then the brightness will turn down. Maybe to about 55. And then the angle, if we just drag that down just ever so slightly to about 178, that'll do, just to give it a little bit of variation. And then now we can make these a 3D layer. So if we toggle switches and we hit 3D layer icon, and then if we bring up the P for position, for energy number 2, just take this back to -200. Just going to bring it much closer to the camera. And now we can create our camera. And also a null object, and we're going to parent our camera to the null. First we'll make it a 3D layer, parent the camera to the null, which just makes things much easier if we want to adjust angles and positions later on. And we hit R to bring up the rotation, and now we're going to X rotation, we're going to change to 75. Y rotation -25, and Z 12. And what we can just do is just hit C on the camera layer and C again. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit and then hit C again until you get the movement tool. I'm just going to bring it down almost. And now if we just hit toggle switches, I'm just going to change these transfer modes. The first one will change to add so we can see through it, and then this one will change to screen. So we haven't got much going on as of yet, still looking a little bit strange. So what we're going to do now is add a little bit of colour to these swirling vortexes. So we'll create a new adjustment layer, and we'll call this gradient. Just put it over our energy layers, and we're going to be using a plugin called four-way gradient. Should be at the bottom, 4-color gradient. Double click that, and if we just set this to overlay, there you go, we're already starting to see some colours, but we just need to tone these colours down. They're a little bit tacky at the minute. Just want to desaturate them, and if you want to copy the colours I used in the example video, start with like a light blue teal kind of colour at the top, and the second one is like a reddish pink. We'll make sure you always stick to really light colours, just so it looks as realistic as possible. And the third one is a really light greeny teal again, and the bottom one another light blue. Now what you can do now is you can actually use these little corner pins here to move the colours precisely where you want. So I think I actually might bring the red one down here close to the camera. That was similar to how we had it in the example video. I'll just bring this blue here. Just so we can see each and every colour clearly. And it just looks a little bit weird how our energy layers appear to be on top of each other. And one of the errors you have with this effect is you can see the edge of the layer. So what you can just do here is scale up both. If you hit S for scale, just scale them up to around about 175 should do it. And now what we can do is we can apply a little bit of animation to these. So if we click R on the stopwatch, it brings up rotation, and then we're going to be animating Z rotation. Start on 0, and we'll go to the 20-second mark right at the end of our scene. For the first one, we'll go to -25. We don't want a lot of rotation here, we want it to be fairly slow. And then with this one, we'll just go a little bit faster, -35. And what we'll do is just have a quick RAM preview and see what we've got so far. It's looking quite realistic, the one on top, spinning faster, giving us that parallax kind of effect. So it's looking pretty nice so far. But another effect I want to stick on is another sharpen adjustment layer, just to help really add contrast and bring these little speckles out, which gives the impression it's like a solar system with stars and planets. So we're going to create another adjustment layer, and we'll just call this sharpen, and then drag it above our energy layers. Again, look for the sharpen plugin, and we're just going to add about 30. As you can see, we're just giving us some nice textures now within our galaxy effect. And now, if you look at the example video, we've got some light rays emitting from our galaxy, and that's created by using a plugin called CC Fast Blur, which is a really nice plugin, and we're going to apply that to an adjustment layer, and we'll just call this blur. And I'm just going to add it again above our energy layers. So if we just type in radial fast blur, there it is, and we want the amount set to 100, and then we need to change the zoom to brightest, and that's just going to pick out the brightest areas. And then if you make sure you change the transfer mode to add, it's looking a bit weird at the minute, but if we just drag down the corner pin, so it's just moving right to the top there, and then we're going to apply curves just to apply some contrast, just because at the minute it's just blowing out our image way too much. So if we just drag this way down about there, it's just giving us just these little bit of lights here emitting out. And then what you can do is you can just again play around with your 4-color gradient. And then if you want some more of these lines, just duplicate the layer and then hit T for opacity and just bring it down. About 15. Maybe even 10. And what you can do with this one is you can change, again, the corner pin. Just to get a few more lines moving in a different direction this time. Boost that back up to about 15. And again, we'll just go ahead and give this another RAM preview, just to make sure we're happy with it. So as you can see, these light beams are corresponding with the movement of our galaxy. And we've created this fairly quickly. What we're going to do now is just start to add our titles. One thing I will do though is if we just create a solid with a black background, we'll call this stars. And just to add just a nice little background feature, we're going to add this CC starburst. And if just we want this speed set to 0, just because we don't want any movement whatsoever. Can't see. If we just solo this so we can see it. Oh, we actually need to make the stars white. There we go, and now we can see them. And move this above the blur layers, so we're not getting that weird light beam effect. And we'll just boost the scatter up to around 280. And the size we want to be maybe 30. And we'll set this to add as well. Maybe turn the scatter down to about 250. Yeah, just adds a little bit of depth to the scene. So what we can do now is create our titles. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a new composition and call this titles or title, and then new text layer. We'll call this galaxy, and if we just go to a line and just put it right in the middle, you can find a line up here. There it is. Just sets your text perfectly in the middle. And I'm using a font called Railway, which is quite nice. And I'm just the spacing, the character spacing, I'm just boosting to about 200. Gives it that cinematic kind of effect. And then just what we'll do is we'll make the text white as it was in the demonstration video. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rectangle shape just to cover the text like that. Don't worry about the colour, it's not important. And then we're going to add an effect called turbulent displace. Just drag that on. And then the amount we're going to boost to 100 and the complexity to 10. And it's just going to give this nice textured edge, which we're actually going to use as a track map to reveal our text. So upon our text layer, if you can't see the track map, just toggle your switches here. And I'm going to set that to alpha matte. And then because this animates automatically, the displacement, all we need to do is animate the size. So if we hit S on the shape layer, scale starts at 0%, and then depending on how quick or slow you want this reveal to be, I want this to be quite slow. So upon the 4-second mark, I'm going to go to 100%, and I'm just going to right click, smoothen that out using an easy ease keyframe. And if you just want to have a quick run preview, see what it's looking like, it's quite a cool reveal this. It's just better than, I think it's a nice way to introduce your text. And what I did in the demonstration video is I duplicated this text layer and the shape layer, and then I made the text a heavier font. So this is a free font if you actually want to use this, but whatever font you use in just on the duplicated text layer, just make it bold, and then move these two to the bottom. And then with this, I'm just going to change the opacity to 50%. so you can see the lighter weight font in front of it. And then just to make sure it fits perfectly inside the heavier font, we'll click on the light font and then just increase the spacing until it fits perfectly in the middle. What we might do is just move it ever so slightly to, we might have to just knock it down a little bit in size. Right, so that's gone down 10 point, and then increase the spacing until it fits perfectly in the middle. Which that'll do, just move it up. Might have to make it quite smaller actually, so do about 190 and then boost the spacing, that should do the trick. This is just to add a little bit of a different effect. On our text, might actually have to move it so the first character sits in the middle, and then bring the spacing back down. Just a little bit of trial and error until you feel it fits perfectly in the middle, which I think that does. And now what I'm going to do is on the thick text, I'm going to change this turbulent displace. I'm actually going to add a fast blur effect. So instead of having this crisp kind of textured edge reveal, we're going to actually blur this just to about 50, and then you can see now there's just this different element coming in, which is quite cool. And then we're just going to fade it out. So if we hit the stopwatch on the shape layer, we're going to get to, maybe actually going to start this off over here, just a little bit off center, so it starts bringing in some of these characters first, which is quite cool. And then we're going to get to about the 2-second mark, hit stopwatch, hit the keyframe for scale, so it's going to get to this point and then it's going to fade back out. So if we go to this keyframe and hit 0, and then if you just command click or control click the first, just to change it to a normal keyframe, and then it's just going to add a nice bit of variation. So we don't actually want the thicker font to stay visible permanently, we want it to fade back out, just like that. And that gives us quite a nice cool reveal, it's something different. And then what you can do as well, the reason you can still see this textured edge is just because the rectangle is too small, but I kind of like how it affects the characters, just gives it something a little bit different. So if you just make sure you do any editing or alterations on the final keyframe, just bring the edges in, and then it's just gonna affect the outer edges of the first and last character, which is kind of cool. You're almost giving yourself a unique font. So now that's done, we can close our title, and back into our scene we can just pre-compose all of these layers, and we'll call this vortex. And now what we can do is we can start to make all of the other elements which made up the original example video I showed you, all these energy waves and what look like galaxies that we seem to pass through. And to do this, I did specify at the start you need optical flares. If you guys don't have optical flares, I suppose you can just miss out this feature and just stick with the title and the vortex. But for those of you that do have optical flares, I'll show you what you need to do. Just create a new solid, and we'll call this one red galaxy. And we'll just make the solid black. And then we'll look for optical flares, and if we just go into options, and we basically want to delete everything here apart from this glow here, which is just the round little dot. So if you just select all of the other layers and hit the little X button, and now we can add an effect called turbulent displace. And before we do that, we'll just up the brightness and scale of our flare. So if we give it brightness of 120 and a scale of around 380, and then with turbulent displace, we're going to change the amount to 335 and the size to 200. And this is already starting to distort our flare, but if you just change the complexity all the way up to 10, you start to get some really nice effects. If we just turn off our vortex, which you can see below, as you can see now, it's starting to look really, really nice. If you just want to move your flare around, you can get loads of different effects. And it just looks like some kind of a galaxy with all these little bits of energy waves flowing through it. It looks really nice. And just to give this some nice animation, we can go to evolution. If you hold the Alt key on your keyboard and click evolution and then type in time *50, this is just going to give some nice flowing light and just make it look as though this energy is live. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pre-compose the red galaxy and move all attributes into the new composition. And then if we go into that, we're going to create an adjustment layer, and we'll just call this color. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the 4-color gradient again. And if we just quickly change the transfer mode to overlay, we start to get some variation in color now upon this flare. We want this one to be red, as we said before, so just try and stick to some red tones. It looks pretty good how it is already, so we'll just leave it like that. Maybe move the red, this one, a little bit closer. And now what we need to do is to get rid of all of this like smoky haze we've got towards the edge of frame. We're just going to need to add yet another adjustment layer, and this is just like a color correction, and we're just basically going to add some contrast to remove that. Otherwise we're going to see a harsh edge when we composite this into our main scene. So if we just type in curves, and you want to just drag the bottom point out, maybe not quite so much. And if we just drag this underneath the colour, maybe a little bit too much contrast. We want to make sure we can still see some of the detail. And I think that should just about do it. As you can see, it's just getting rid of this smoky haze around the edges, which is exactly what we want. Now if we go back into our scene and we click on the toggle switch mode, and we just make the red galaxy a 3D layer, and we click the toggle switch again, and we change the transfer mode to screen. If you just want to go into your vortex and just cut out the stars and then paste them into our scene and drop them right to the bottom. That just proves now that we can see through this reddish galaxy. And basically what we want to do now is just start playing around with some different colours. So if you go into your project panel, and I've created a folder just called galaxies. If you drag your red one into that, and then we can just duplicate this, clicking Command D or Control D. And now we'll do a purple galaxy, so we'll just call that purple. And what we can do is also just apply a little bit of variation to this flare. So if you just want to change things like the scale, and then most importantly the amount and size, this is where you start to change the shape and appearance of it. You might need to apply some drastic changes to the numbers. And then also if we go to evolution, options, under turbulent displace, and just change the random seed, that'll completely change the shape of the galaxy. And it's all about, you're never going to get the exact same as me, I don't think. It's completely randomized. But as long as it's different from the last one, And then what we can do is go into our colour layer and then just start to get some purple tones. So we'll start with a nice bright pink and we'll go for more of a purple. I just need to up some of these values, make them a little bit more obvious so we can see the different colours. Might need to be just a lot brighter. I even need to make this more of a red to show up, and maybe here too. And there, that's... You might need to drift off into a completely different colour really to get the effect you want. I've got a red there and it's blended with the blues to make more of a pink, which is a nice effect. And then just be careful that it don't reach the edge. As you can see there, we're drifting into the edge. So if we just go to the random seed again, just go down and get something that's more central, and then we can go into the curves and just bring this down a little bit, just to get rid of that smoke that's heading towards the edge of the frame. So that's okay for a purple galaxy. If we want to drag that in now, we can on top of the red, and again change that to screen. So already we're starting to get a really nice galaxy kind of effect going on. And what we basically want to do is create different layers, because we're all going to be offsetting these in Z space. We're going to be traveling through each galaxy. So we'll start with a red. We can just duplicate that, clicking Command D, and then if you press S to bring up scale, and just to differentiate it from the original, put in negative value, and that just changes it so it looks completely different. And then if you want to move each one more to the side, just to create a little bit of a gap in the middle, which we're eventually going to travel through. Apply some rotation, just hit R on the keyboard. So that's our first red layer done. If we just get rid of them, we can click on our purple now to bring that up. And if you just want to play around with the rotation, again, this is completely up to you guys, how you want it to look and the composition of each element. Just duplicate it again and rotate it all the way around. And that's our purple galaxy. So we can turn them off and we can duplicate the purple galaxy, and we could maybe create a green galaxy now. And we'll go into that. And again, we'll just change the seed. I think that's all we need. Maybe bring the amount back down. And bring the scale down a little bit. And just play around with the seed. That looks okay. And then colour. Obviously, play around with the green colours. We'll get like an aqua there. I think that's looking pretty decent for the green. We'll go back to our scene now and we'll drag that in. Again, turn that to screen. And just rotate this. And again, we want to duplicate that. Maybe I'm just applying as much variation as possible. You don't want it to be obvious that they're just duplicates. Maybe add another duplicate and just stick that right to the bottom. And if we uncheck them, now we can create one more, and we'll make more of an orange kind of galaxy now. Or maybe we'll go for a blue one. So again, apply some variation. And we'll leave that. And just bring some of these points in. Now we'll maybe make one of them more of a purple. Yeah, I think that'll do for the blue one. Go back to our scene and drag it in. Turn to screen. And duplicate these. And just do one more duplicate. And what we can start doing now is, if we turn them all on, apart from the vortex, we've got a lot going on now. We just need to start staggering them within Z space. So we'll create a new camera. And we'll just make sure all of these are 3D layers, which they're not. So just tick on the 3D layer button for all of them. And what we can do is just apply our animation to the camera first. So if we just want to click on P, and then hold Shift and click A for the point of interest and R for rotation. And we just want to hit the stopwatch for all of them. Make sure you're on right at the start of your timeline. And then we're going to go to around the 4-second mark. And we're just going to zoom all the way through. If you just hit C on your keyboard, it goes through the camera options. Just going to zoom all the way through these to around, go until you get to around 12,000. So as you can see, 12,000 now, and just hit stopwatch for, I'll just leave orientation. We'll select these and use easy ease. And then if we go to the start, so our red galaxy, we can move close to the camera to about minus 500. And you might want to just turn off all these to begin with and work on different colours at a time. So we're going forward. So we'll hit P for position and we'll type in 1,500 for the purple. And we'll just have a quick look at the timing. If we just hit the space bar, we'll go through. So you can get an idea of how fast you're going to be moving through the galaxy. So that's quite fast. So I think I might just boost up that to 2,000. 2,000. And then we'll just start to move around each element now. And you could even play around with pushing them back, so maybe 2,500 for the second purple galaxy. I might just duplicate another one because can't really see these very much. Quite a small galaxy, so that's fine. And then we'll tick all of the green galaxies on, and we'll make this maybe 4,000 for these. And we can just see we're approaching the green now. Could even do 4,500. And we'll just move them up, and we'll just start to position each layer where we want. And I'll just push this one back to 5,000. And then this one here, bring that down. And we'll maybe make that to 5,200. And now we'll turn on the blue galaxies. And just for now, we'll make these 7,000. We might need to tinker with these settings later if we feel they fly past us without giving us much time to actually see them. But we just need to set up a basic position for them all at the minute. So if you just want to play around with the different positions, remember we want it to feel as though we're flying through the galaxies. So try and move a few of them to the edges. And remember to keep adding some variation to the shape and the appearance of them. And then if we want to just add some more levels to the blue, so 7,500 for that. Maybe this one's 8,000. And we've done all of his galaxies so far. We've set them all up in Z space. So just run preview it and see what we're looking at so far. So it's looking quite nice now. I just think it's a little bare, so I might just duplicate some of these elements, which you guys can do too. So with the red, I might add another duplicate in, and I'll just hit P for position, and I'll push this back to maybe 500. I'll just put it up in the corner. Just keep playing through to see. Maybe push this back even more to 1,000. And then maybe another duplicate here, drag it to the bottom, just to add a little bit of rotation. That's nice. And then we're coming to the purple. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all the purple and press P. And I'm just going to drag them back and just basically add 1,000 on. So it was originally 2,500. I was looking at the top one, and I'll just make sure the top one is 3,500 now. And then with the green, I'll select all of them, and the top one's 5,200. So I'll just go to around 7,000 now. I'm just wanting to add bigger distances between each galaxy. And then the blue, I'll select all of them, and I'll just set them to maybe 10,000. This just gives us more time to actually look at these galaxies, and I think that looks a lot better already, because we were flying through the galaxies in less than 2 seconds, whereas now we're about 3. So that's looking good. Just keep editing some of these. We'll add another purple galaxy in there. And we'll make this 4,000. And just add a little bit of rotation. And then we've got quite a lot of green. We'll just add one. Maybe put one right in the middle this time. And we could maybe increase the size as well. That's giving us some more variation, which we haven't done yet. And then we'll move forward again to the blue. And we could do with quite a few more blue. And I might just scale this one up as well. And I might just duplicate one of the purple galaxies, and we'll put that in amongst the blue. So if we boost that up to 11,000, we can see that there. And we'll just boost the size of that. And it's just starting to fill up now, which is nice. And if you still feel we're traveling through the galaxies at quite a fast speed, we can maybe just drop back the position by 1,000, and then that's obviously just going to slow it down. Maybe go to about 10,000, and that's just going to make sure you go through them. So the final frame, you should be through all of these. So around 11,000. That should have just slightly slowed the animation down. It's looking good. So if just Command A and hit U to close all of that, we can now look at compositing our vortex. I don't really like how it's in the bottom corner. I want to add it to the top right hand corner, similar to how it was in the example video. So if we just go into the vortex scene, and we can just move our two energy layers. If we hit P for position, and if I can remember the settings was 1910 by 1060, and the top one was minus 450, the bottom one was minus 250, and then again 1910 by 1060. And for the null, if we just hit R for rotation, and we want that to be 103 and then 00. And also what I want to do is just increase the composition settings. We'll just go to about 3,500. That should do. All we need to do now is hit C on the keyboard, and we'll just bring our vortexes back down, but also make sure all of these layers here, the gradient to the blur, just hit S and we just boost that up just so it fills the frame. That's fine. And on the energy layers, if we just hit R for rotation as well, we want 7 for the X, 7 for the X, and Y rotation will need to be -10 and -10. And it's looking a little bit better. We just need to zoom out. So if we again hit C on the keyboard, and we'll zoom the camera out, that's a little bit too much, and then hit another few more times, and we'll just move it to around this area. Maybe we'll try and flatten it off a little bit, so we use the rotation setting, and that's looking much better. And what we'll need to do is just edit our gradient, because obviously we've moved it around. We just need to bring these points back up. I think that works. And then for the blur, what we'll need to do is click on that and just drag this little point right to the top, and then do the same with the second blur. If you're not getting as many streaks this time, obviously because we've moved it around a lot, you'll just have to bring this curves up ever so slightly, and then these lines will reappear, and do the same on the other blur. And I think that looks okay. So now if we go back into our scene, and it's already starting to look better now, the composition with this being at the top. We could make this a 3D layer, the vortex, but I think it's just going to be a little bit too responsive to the camera. So instead we can just hit S and just animate the scale. So right at the start of the timeline, hit the stopwatch for scale, and we'll make that maybe 60%. And then a 10-second mark, we'll zoom into about 80%. And now that's just giving us a nice little bit of animation. Just make the last keyframe easy ease. What we can do now is just add in a little bit of additional camera movement. We're just going to zoom in just another 1,000, I think, or about 1,000 pixels. So it's going to quickly zoom through all of these galaxies and then really smoothly come to a very, very slow stop. So what we'll need to do for that is click on position, the word itself, then we'll go into the graph editor, and it's just all about editing and manipulating this curve here. Unfortunately, you can't do it with just a button or a preset. You have to go into the graph editor. And so if we just move both of these up, and what we might have to do, if we just come out, we'll just turn the first, all of these keyframes, we'll make them into easy ease 2, and then just select position again and go back into the graph editor. And I think that already is gonna help. If any of these keyframes unalign themselves, just drag them back so they're in line. drag the title in and make it a 3D layer. And we want to be boosting the Z position up to something similar to what it says on the position of the camera. So around 12,000, we'll start to see it. There it is. So if we push that to about 14,000, and we want to move that maybe to just about there, so it starts animating in around about here, and that's fine. And then what we can also do is we could duplicate one of these galaxies. We'll call this multicolored galaxy. And this is going to appear right at the end, just filling in some of the frame because it's a little bit bland at the minute. So we'll go to our gradient and we'll just add in a variety of different colours. I think that should just about do it. Maybe make these slightly lighter. And now we can drag in our multicoloured, and we'll make that a 3D layer, and again add something like 14,000 for the Z position. Make sure it's set to screen as well. We could also set the title to add, just so that pops out a little bit for us. And with this multicolored galaxy, we could just drag it to the edge. What we need to do as well is set our vortex to screen so we can see our stars. Forgot about that. And now back to the multicolored. If we just want to go back into that, we can see quite a bit of the this white kind of edge coming in. So if we just drag that down ever so slightly, that should get rid of the majority of it. And we'll set that to add, and just bring that to the bottom, and maybe add a little bit of rotation as well. And then I'm going to do another multicolored galaxy, and this one's going to be more of a red kind of colour. So we add in loads of red tones, a bit of orange, and I'll just play around with the seed as well. Evolution options, seed. That looks much better. I'm going to just make some of the colours slightly lighter. And that's looking a little bit better. Maybe add a little bit of bluey in here, always gives a nice effect. And make that solid red. And that's solid red too. Yeah, it's just all about playing around with the position of these little pins. I think that looks okay. So we can add that into our scene too. And we'll set that to add. And again, make it a 3D layer and type in maybe 14,000. Or maybe even 13, so it's right in front of the camera, like that. That's better. And you might just have to bring the scale down so it doesn't pixelate. Just to around 85. And we can still see the edge of the first multicolored galaxy. So if we just got the color correction and bring that down, maybe actually change the seed, because this one's got quite a lot of smoky areas towards the edge of frame. So again, evolution options, That one's a little bit better, but just go to the colour correction and just bring it down even more. Should have got rid of the problem, and there, that looks much better now. And remember to just make this about 80% in size too. And if we just drag the second multicolour to the side, and again that needs to be made much smaller because it's starting to pixelate ever so slightly. So around 40%. That should do it. And just try and get a nice position. That looks nice. We could maybe even push that further back so it's behind our text, so it's around 14,000. And then if we give this a RAM preview, we can then identify this smooth in the camera from fast to slow, just to make sure it's a nice smooth transition. And we've got a nice smooth transition there, but the only problem is this little bounce back here, which if you guys have got as well, there's a really simple way of getting rid of this. Just try and find the moment right before it bounces back, which is about there, and just stick in a keyframe there and delete this last one, and then you can just drag these back to 10 seconds. And then what I might do is just hit C, just zoom back out ever so slightly. We don't want the text quite as big. Could maybe even make the scale 90%. And then that should have got rid of this bounce back effect, which if you just want to give another RAM preview, and now we've gotten rid of that bounce back effect, which is perfect, and we've got a nice smooth transition from fast camera movement to slow. The final thing I want to do is if we just add in a keyframe for the orientation. So it's on 0 here, and at the start we're going to go to maybe 100. And then just that little bit of rotation really helps to sell this effect. And what I think I'll do is I'll just drag the title back a little bit more, so it's more or less revealed itself as the camera is slowing down. And I think we're pretty much there. If you think there's a little bit too much of a gap, I think about there. Again, just duplicate some of the galaxies just to fill in these blank areas. So I might just duplicate maybe one of the multicoloured and hit P and just drag it back in Z space and just find a nice area for it. Remember to try and differentiate it in shape and size. Just rotate it and we'll just drag it off to the side, and then maybe duplicate the original multicoloured galaxy. Again, hit P for position. I'll bring that back to around 12,000 and we'll just rotate that. And hit S for scale if you think it's a little bit too pixelated. What we're going to do as well to get rid of any kind of pixelation when the galaxies get a little bit too close to the camera, if you just hit the toggle switch mode and select every single layer actually, and just hit the motion blur key there, and then if you turn on the motion blur, as you can see now, it basically eradicates any kind of pixelation because it adds this natural motion blur, which is really cool, but beware, it really does add time onto your render. So I'll just take that out, and then just if there's any problems, like you see these harsh lines here, all it is, it's just a case of going into this and just moving these points here to just make them a little bit darker. As you can see, we've gotten rid of that line now. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to show. It's been a really long tutorial, but I hope you guys have learned, well, a lot of different effects here, and thanks for sticking with me.